The battle over gun control rages on, and today one of America's oldest companies took a stand. GE, whose headquarters happens to be just 35 minutes from the site of the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting, just tightened rules on providing financing to firearm retailers. And this just a week after the Senate knocked down an amendment for expanded background checks on gun purchases. For someone who knows a whole lot about politics and business, we're joined by David Plouffe, former senior advisor to President Obama. He's also the newest contributor to us right here at Bloomberg Television. So welcome to the family, David. Great to have you on board.
It's great to be here, Trish. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about GE and its decision to limit financing to firearm companies. What retailers, I should say. What is your reaction to that?
Well, as you mentioned, GE is obviously headquartered just in the shadows of Newtown, and my understanding is this is a pretty small percentage of their portfolio, obviously. But I think everyone in America, companies, finance companies, elected officials, governors, mayors, are reacting to what happened in Newtown and Aurora. I think a company like GE is obviously, the leadership's going to talk about something like that. They're going to listen to our shareholders. I thought the vote last week, you mentioned the vote, was disappointing just because I can't think of a single issue in the country, whether there's UFOs or not, or what we should do about any economic issue, that gets 90% support. And obviously, to lose that vote. But as the president said last week, that's not the end of it. But I think there's been a lot of soul searching after Newtown. Companies like GE and others are deliberating what they're going to do. But, this is it's a tough issue, obviously. People have very strong feelings.
Yeah.
My sense is over time, things like background checks, though, is such a common sense thing to do. I'd be surprised over time if it's ultimately not successful.
I guess one of the other questions that people have now is, in light of Boston, in light of that city being locked down, might it actually hinder this debate in some ways? If you're someone who believes that you should be able to have a gun for self-protection, you probably got more fuel for your argument as a result of Boston.
Well, we'll have to see. Obviously, we're all still, reflecting on what happened last week, and we're following the legal proceedings closely. But, my sense is that there is, you've got broad support amongst National Rifle Association members, amongst Republican voters, Democratic voters, independents on this issue of background checks. Some of the other issues get a little more complicated. But listen, we live in an age of technology. So the notion that we couldn't, very quickly in a way that doesn't overly burden people, check to make sure we're selling, guns, not to people with any kind of history that would suggest they might commit violent acts. It's just in the year 2013 is a common sense thing to do.
Well, it seems like it's become so political. You say it's a common sense thing to do, and I think most people wouldn't argue with that idea. I mean, you don't want to put firearms in the hands of crazy people. So why can't we get something like this through?
Well, I think, it's interesting. You saw a state like Colorado, which is no liberal bastion, passing a package similar to what the president proposed. You've seen, obviously, the state of Connecticut make similar progress. So you're seeing some progress at the state level. I think here in Washington, again, I want to go back to 90% of the people support this. You're not going to find a single issue anywhere near that in American politics today. So if you go out on the streets of, whether it's Manhattan, New York, or Manhattan, Kansas, Florida, Colorado, Montana, you're going to find support for something like background checks. But here in Washington, obviously, you've got a lot of people. The gun lobby is very powerful. Obviously, the mayor of New York has entered the fray here, I think, in a productive way, to show people who are willing to support things like background check that they'll get support in their efforts. But it's tough. But I think here in Washington, listen, there's so many issues, whether it's how we balance the deficit in the right way, this issue where Washington seems to be a little bit disconnected from the country right now.
Well, David, you advised President Obama successfully on two of his elections. So the question is, if you were still in the White House today and advising President Obama, what would be your advice to move the various policies forward? Whether you start with background checks or take it farther than that?
Well, obviously on background checks, I think a lot of the senators who supported, including our opponent from 2008, John McCain, said that, they're going to come back to that issue. And so I think there needs to be discussion and strategy about the best way to do that. Obviously, we have an opportunity to pass immigration reform, which is going to be so important for our economy. You go out to California or Silicon Alley, New York, or, what employers say is they need more engineers. We are training people here providing them skills, and they leave and compete against us. So immigration reform, in addition to bringing people out of the shadows, toughening the border security, can be a huge plus for our economy. The good news is that seems to be a place where there's a lot of bipartisan, not just support, but energy behind it. So that would be a great thing to do for our economy. The grand bargain, which we've chased for a long time, as you know, has a heartbeat again. And you see Democratic and Republican senators seeming to say enough's enough. There's more common ground here than not. Now, getting from the common ground that exists to a final deal that'll pass the Senate and the House that the president will sign, is going to be hard. But there's a heartbeat. And I think people understand that if we can come up with a sensible long-term deficit reduction package that also allows us to invest in things like technology and research, that would be a very good thing for our economy. Our companies, our businesses could certainly use more certainty. I think the American people, by the way, would like to see their government really work. And if we could pass immigration reform this year and also follow that up with a deficit reduction package, a grand bargain as it's called down here, that would be a terrific, I think, shot of confidence, not just to the economy, but to the American people. And are those, by the way, David, more important than gun control from your point of view at the moment? Well, they're all important. I mean, I think Newtown was, something we'll all never forget. And I think it required a response. And I think we're going to continue to try and work on that because it's important to protect our kids and our communities. Immigration reform is something that seems very ripe right now. I'm sure there'll be moments where it looks like it may not pass, but right now there's an enormous amount of energy in both parties, in the business community, in the faith community, in the law enforcement community. So the stars seem to be aligned here, but it's going to take a lot of work. And obviously, our economy is still not strong enough. So anything we can do to help our businesses hire, to help our workers get skills, we need to pursue that. Because, we've had good growth, we've created jobs, but it's nowhere near where we need to be.